Long before European explorers came to Africa, there lived in the east a powerful tribal chief called Luba. Luba had gained his popularity through commanding and winning fierce battles against other tribes, through hunting and killing the deadliest game in the jungle, and through pulling off the biggest cattle raids on the neighbouring pastoral tribes. Luba was also known for having the most heads of cattle, for being the richest landlord, and for having the biggest homestead in Amuria. But more than everything, Luba was known as the chief who kept marrying new wives, because the current ones only bore him boys, yet he also wanted some girls. In the end, Chief Luba's family comprised 24 wives and 75 children, but only the youngest 5 of his children were girls, and because they were few, pretty, and born by the youngest of his wives, Chief Luba loved his daughters more than he loved anything. They were named Asio, Apio, Alupo, Alaso, and Alia in that order, and the chief always told people that they were the prettiest girls in the region. Thus everyone referred to Luba's daughters as the jewels of Amuria. This made Chief Luba fonder of his daughters with every day that passed. He treated them like princesses. He employed chaperones to do everything for them. He hired comedians to ensure their happiness, and he assigned them his best soldiers to follow them wherever they went. Every day he showered them with praise, and every day he told his sons that no man in the region deserved any of his daughters for a wife. The years swept by. Before long, all the 5 girls were fully grown and ripe for marriage. Now everyday suitors flocked into Chief Luba's homestead, seeking permission to marry his beautiful daughters. But rather than welcome them, the chief scolded and chased them away. He even beat up some and threatened others with death. Much to his irritation, however, the flow of suitors just kept growing. In the end, Chief Luba decided to fend off the relentless suitors by asking hefty dowries for his daughters. For Asio, the eldest girl, he tagged a dowry of 100 heads of zebu cattle, 150 goats, 200 sheep, and 500 bantam chickens. No man in this region is wealthy enough to afford such dowry, he said to his sons. Yet, only 30 days later, a suitor presented himself with all the required cattle, goats, sheep, and bantam chickens in tow, and Chief Luba sadly watched as the man took away his eldest daughter. For Alpio, the second girl, the chief doubled up the dowry paid for Asio, and he laughed to himself, thinking that no man would be rich enough to afford that much. 6 rain seasons passed without a suitor coming forth, and Chief Luba began to brag about his wisdom. Towards the end of the 6th season, however, a Turkana suitor presented himself with all the cattle, sheep, goats, and chickens in tow. Chief Luba felt the tears well in his eyes as he gave away his second daughter. For Alupo, the third girl, the chief further doubled up the dowry that had been paid for Opio, and also asked for a calabash of black pearls. Then he said to his sons, "If the previous dowry took them 6 rain seasons to raise, this one will take them forever." He laughed delightedly. A long time passed before anyone showed up, and Chief Luba started to boast about his wits. "I knew no one would come this time," he said. Yet again, a suitor eventually presented himself with the entire dowry in tow, and, this time, Chief Luba shed a tear after he lost another of his coveted daughters, something that so saddened him, he spent days without talking to anybody. Now Chief Luba remained with 2 daughters, and he had learnt a lesson that asking for hefty dowries alone could not discourage men from seeking the marriage of his beautiful girls. He, therefore, decided that any man who wanted to marry either of his 2 remaining daughters would have to pay the required dowry and then accomplish a difficult task of the chief's choosing. He also decided that any man who paid the dowry but failed to accomplish the given task would not get back his dowry, and he knew that he had finally put them off. But still suitors came asking for the 2 remaining girls. So for Alaso, the 4th girl, the chief tagged the same dowry as was paid for Alupo. However, any man who came up with the dowry would also have to fight and behead a lion before taking home the girl. No one showed up in a long period. Chief Luba knew that he had finally gotten rid of his daughter's suitors. But just as he was beginning to celebrate, a Karimojong warrior presented himself with the entire dowry in tow. And when asked if he was ready to fight a lion, the Karimojong, a fit man with a body toned by years of hard work, stood akimbo and smugly replied, "For a girl of such beauty, I will slay the lion." The chief and his sons split their sides with laughter. For the fight, the chief's sons built a big bamboo cage in the family courtyard. Then Chief Luba ordered for the biggest lion in the land to be hunted. The chief's sons captured the lion that very day and locked it in the cage. Then, for 3 days, they fed the lion on 2 goats a day to boost its energy. But on the eve of the fight, they didn't give it any food, so that it would be hungrier and thus angrier during the duel. On the 6th day, the Karimojong arrived for the battle, and the whole village assembled in the chief's compound to watch the deadly fight. Even Alaso, the bride, was there to witness her groom-to-be wrestle the fierce beast. And at midday, when everyone was anxious for the fight to begin, the chief's eldest son led the warrior into the cage. The warrior had nothing on him, save for a small piece of cowhide tied around his waist, a small leather pouch that he carried in his left hand, and a bayonet tied around his thigh. The lion instantly lunged for him, but the warrior did not flinch. He just stood alert, with legs wide apart, and lifted his arms straight up as the fierce beast advanced. Then, as it leaped for his throat, he hurled the contents of his pouch into the lion's eyes. They were crushed red pepper seeds, and they instantly blinded the lion with their stinging effect. The lion halted its attack in mid-air and retreated in bewilderment, howling frantically and spinning around in pain. Then it lifted its front paws, blindly lashing out at anything. That is when the warrior made his move. He suddenly stooped and charged forward like a mad buffalo, smashing his head into the lion's flank with the force of a cannonball. In the next instant, he seized both the lion's front limbs with his arms, and in one quick gesture, swept the blinded beast off its hind limbs and felled it to the ground. Without wasting time, he mounted it, sat on its belly, and punched it several times. The crowd cheered as the lion let out a piercing roar. When the warrior was certain it had died, he slaughtered it and presented its head to the visibly stunned chief. Chief Luba was racked with sobs as he saw another of his precious daughters taken away forever. Now he remained with only Alia, the most beautiful of them all, the one he loved most, the one he hoped to never lose. And he vowed that no one would take her away from him. For days the chief racked his brains for an impossible task to give to Alia's suitors. He thought and thought and thought. Then one evening, just as Chief Luba and his elder sons prepared to go for their usual hunting, it began to rain. The rain started as sleety drizzle, but it soon developed into a thunderstorm, lashing down on earth with torrential force. As a result, Chief Luba and his sons cancelled their routine evening hunting until the rain stopped. Suddenly, as they all sat there waiting for the rain to stop, Chief Luba started laughing to himself. He laughed and laughed and laughed. His sons asked him what was making him laugh that much. "Now I know how I'm going to deter all those men from marrying my Alia," he pronounced, and all his sons turned to face him. "How do you hope to do it this time round?" his eldest son asked. "Simple. I'm going to ask those suitors to walk through the rain without getting wet," the chief smugly replied. "That is impossible," said all his sons. Exactly, replied Chief Luba, and that is what all those suitors will have to do if they want to marry my Alia. And so for Alia, his last daughter, it was announced that Chief Luba wanted the same dowry as had been paid for Zakia, but that any interested suitor would also have to walk through a heavy rain without getting wet. Many men had waited for Alia's turn to get married. All of them had vowed to pay whatever dowry it would cost to win her, and all of them were ready to attempt any task that Chief Luba would assign them. But when the news broke of the chief's latest task, they all thought that it was impossible, and that Chief Luba was running mad. For months, no one presented himself to ask for Alia. "See, I told you I would fail them this time," the chief always told his sons, and then laughed triumphantly. Towards the end of one rainy season, however, a suitor eventually came along who was prepared to pay the dowry and to perform the task. Chief Luba's heart skipped a beat on hearing this. "Who is he, and just how does he intend to perform the task?" he asked. "He is called Ekanya the Rainmaker, but he won't reveal his plans about performing the task." "Do you think he will do it?" the chief asked, afraid that he might also lose the most prized of his daughters. "Let's just wait and see." And so the news went around that a rainmaker would be performing the dry man in the rain task to marry Alia. The following day, the signs of a downpour formed in the sky, and the whole village assembled in Chief Luba's compound to witness as the impossible happened. Streaks of lightning zigzagged through the clouds, shortly followed by deafening claps of thunder, and the whole crowd watched with bated breaths as the rainmaker performed a string of strange rituals to summon the attention of the rain gods. He lit up a bonfire, pierced a goose feather in its midst, and sprinkled crushed busana leaves over it. Then he fell on his knees, spread his arms towards the sky, and recited this prayer. "O ya gods of the rains, I am Ekanya, the envoy of the rain, loyal servant of yours for no gain. So please, only on my sides, may you sprinkle your wee-wee. Create a path for me as I tread forth to pick up my bride." 6 yards from where he was, it started to rain, and when everyone saw this, they thought the impossible was just about to happen. Ekanya turned and walked towards the rain, chanting to the gods as he moved. Soon he was within inches from the rain, and everyone held their breaths in anticipation. Ekanya took one last breath, pressed his eyes shut, and made one last commandment to the rains not to wet him. Apparently they were still asleep, for the rains drenched Ekanya as soon as he made his entry. The chief was the first to laugh, then his sons began to laugh, then his soldiers laughed. Soon the whole crowd was bursting with laughter as Ekanya stood like a fool in the rains, cursing the gods for betraying him. When the rain stopped, Chief Luba took back his daughter, but also forgave Ekanya and asked him to take back his dowry. That rainy season passed without another suitor presenting himself to ask for Alia, and Chief Luba felt great. "No one will ever perform the task," he boasted. "In fact, I am halving the dowry for whoever performs that task." So the following rainy season, an announcement was made that Chief Luba had halved Alia's dowry for any man who could accomplish the dry man in the rain task. A suitor presented himself only after 2 days. "Who is he, and what has he got in store for us?" "His name? His Ekiring, and he says he is a rain dodger." "Is someone planning to dodge the rain?" "I think so." "That is impossible." "Do not say that before." And so the news went out that a rain dodger had presented himself to ask for Alia's hand in marriage. A few days later, the signs of a downpour formed in the sky, and the whole village again assembled at Chief Luba's home. The rain dodger did not perform any rituals. He just went through a few acrobatic routines as he waited for the clouds to open up. And when it finally began to rain, he quickly got to his feet and, wearing only leaves around his waist, started dodging the raindrops. At the outset, it was much easier for him because the rain came down in sleets and everyone watched in silence as Acholi breakdanced his way towards his bride. But as he moved further, the intensity of the rain kept growing, making it increasingly harder for Acholi to duck the drops. Eventually, the rains came pouring down in torrents, and soon Acholi was drenched. Chief Luba split his sides with laughter. When the rain stopped, he took back his daughter, but also forgave Acholi and gave him back his dowry. "I told you no one would manage this task," he boasted. "In fact, I have decided to waive the whole dowry for anyone who performs that task. I will give him my daughter for free," he declared. "He will take my Alia free of charge." And so the news went out that anyone who would perform the rain-evading task would take Alia for free, and it excited every man. But in a long time, no one came up to perform the task, something that made Chief Luba a very proud man. But how can someone walk through the rain without getting himself wet? He asked himself. He had watched the rainmaker and the rain dodger make complete idiots of themselves in front of Alia. He had concluded that no one would ever take her home for a wife. Yet, every night when he went to sleep, Omeron found himself thinking about the chief's daughter. Thoughts of performing the task never left his mind. Then one night, as Omeron lay sleepless on his papyrus mat, thinking about Alia, it began to rain. And as it rained, Omeron pictured himself walking towards her, emerging dry at the end of the day, and Alia smiling as he took her home to be his wife. As he thought, it kept raining, and so he thought about the task again. Meanwhile, the grass-thatched roof on his hut was shaking like it might fly off any time due to the storm outside, and Omeron feared that if it flew off, he would have to be soaked. The roof. Just then, the germ of an idea started forming in his head. Suddenly, Omeron jerked up to sitting position, his eyes fixed on the roof, his heart pulsating with excitement. "I think I can do it," he told himself. The following day, he dissembled his granary and studied its roof. 2 days later, he presented himself to Chief Luba, asking for Alia's hand in marriage. "Who is he, and what does have in store for us?" Chief Luba asked upon learning that another suitor had finally shown up. He is called Omeron, a herdsman, but he calls himself the village thinker, and he says he is going to use a rain shield. Rain shield? What on earth is a rain shield? Nobody knows apart from the thinker himself. Well then, let him come when it next rains. It's been long since we last laughed. And so the news went out that a young herdsman wanted to accomplish the difficult, rain-evading task using a rain shield, and everyone prepared to go and witness. Meanwhile, Omeron went about constructing his rain shield. The day finally came when the signs of a heavy rain formed in the skies, and everyone assembled in Chief Luba's compound to witness as Omeron attempted the impossible. Even the rainmaker and the rain dodger came to witness. And as the lightning streaked and the thunder roared in the sky, Omeron walked across the courtyard to prepare himself for his task. In his hands, he held a cone-shaped, grass-thatched structure that looked like the roof of a granary. Chief Luba and his sons watched him curiously. And so the news went out that a young herdsman wanted to accomplish the difficult, rain-evading task using a rain shield, and everyone prepared to go and witness. Meanwhile, Omeron went about constructing his rain shield. The day finally came when the signs of a heavy rain formed in the skies, and everyone assembled in Chief Luba's compound to witness as Omeron attempted the impossible. And as the lightning streaked and the thunder roared in the sky, Omeron walked across the courtyard to prepare himself for his task. In his hands he held a cone-shaped, grass-thatched structure that looked like the roof of a granary. The rains, a heavy downpour that even bore hailstones, came down without warning. With bated breaths, everyone fixed their eyes on Omeron, who promptly held his rain shield over his head. Then he rose and, slowly as ever, walked towards his bride. The Rainmaker and the Rain Dodger could not believe their eyes as they watched Omeron walk towards Alia beneath his rain shield, completely untouched by the rains. Omeron finally reached Alia and curtsied before the chief to indicate that he had accomplished his task. "Alia is all yours," the chief declared, and the whole village went into frenzy as Omeron picked up Alia, and they danced in front of the chief. Only Chief Luba was unhappy. It greatly saddened him that what he had always considered an impossible task had turned out to be the easiest instead. It also pained him that of all his daughters, the one he loved best had been taken for nothing, and of all people, by a poor herdsman.